The evening breeze was a bit cold, but it gradually cleared my mind, which had been in chaos for so many days. The next day, I took a day off and drafted an agreement to terminate the contract after careful consideration. Why did you take a day off? Are you sick? I'll go back and accompany you to the hospital later. Ding! Wisnovel reminds you to click the subscribe button in the bottom right corner to read the complete novel. Looking at the message he sent, I inexplicably felt a surge of emotions, wanting to tear up the agreement. I took a deep breath and replied to his message. It's nothing, just been working overtime a lot lately, a little tired. Resting for a while will be fine. I placed the agreement conspicuously in the living room and clenched my teeth as I left to find a new place to live. I didn't dare to go back until late at night. The living room was dim, but I immediately saw the familiar figure on the sofa. I felt a bit uneasy in my heart, but still moved towards him. The agreement was still placed on the table, and I couldn't tell if he had touched it or not. Mr. Wright, this is the agreement I drafted. Please take a look and see if there's anything else to add. He tightly grasped my wrist, and his somewhat sinister gaze finally shifted to me from the agreement. Feeling a little uncomfortable, I lowered my head and simply pushed the agreement closer to him. Stefan chuckled ambiguously, picked up the agreement and threw it aside, then without a word, he picked me up and headed towards the bedroom. Are we still acting? But isn't the surveillance in the living room? I panicked in my heart and uncontrollably started to struggle, successfully angering the person on the brink of fury. He slapped my thigh twice, even though he restrained his strength, it still stung like fire. I have seen many sides of him, but I have never seen this almost cold and ruthless lip before. I fell onto the soft quilt, and in my mind, I couldn't help but picture his somewhat overly paranoid appearance, almost instinctively wanting to escape. But as soon as I sat on the edge of the bed, a strong arm reached out from behind and tightly wrapped around my waist. Are you so afraid of me? His lips landed on my ear, lacking the usual heat, instead exuding an indescribable chill. I didn't know how to respond to him, and even the fingertips resting on his hand trembled slightly. He seemed indifferent to my reaction, firmly holding onto my hand, warming it up little by little, enclosing it in his palm. Just as I thought he had returned to the gentle and polite Stefan as usual, he suddenly exerted force, pressing my shoulders down onto the bed. There was no warmth in his eyes, and he impatiently loosened his tie, tying it around my hand. Mr. Wright. My voice trembled uncontrollably, this version of him was too unfamiliar. He brushed over my eyebrows and eyes. Don't be afraid, let's talk about the matter of that agreement now, maybe there's a misunderstanding. My words were stuttering, and my eyes kept welling up with tears. We agreed that as long as we find someone we like, the agreement will be automatically terminated. He didn't say anything, nor did he look at me, his cool fingertips slid down to my collarbone. He licked away my tears and decisively silenced the words he didn't want to hear. It wasn't until I felt my breath becoming scarce in my chest that the control on my lips slightly loosened. Aviva, think about it carefully, okay? I don't want to be angry with you. In my mind, there was only an indescribable sense of grievance and fear, with no other thoughts to consider his intentions. Mr. Wright, as stated in the agreement, you cannot force me to do things I don't like. He paused and stood up silently. Soon, he came in holding the agreement from that time. Is this it? I quickly nodded. However, under my hopeful gaze, he slowly tore the agreement into pieces. He lightly kissed the corner of my lips and said, All right, now it doesn't count anymore. That night, Stefan seemed to have gone mad. All the suppressed emotions from the past erupted that day. Countless red marks covered my neck. I knew he liked my collarbone, and that night it became the most affected area. He forced me to tell him who I really liked. I liked him, but he already had someone he liked. Why could he still possess my love? If I hadn't cried so much, he probably would have taken that final step. He released me from my restraints and left the room somewhat irritably. It was the first time I saw him smoking, with an indescribable sense of desolation. He had no intention of letting me go. Instead, he gave me a long vacation. He cooked for me every day and bought the things I liked to eat, but he didn't allow me to step out of the house. Later on, he even moved his office to our home, wanting to keep an eye on me at all times. Mr. Wright. I couldn't remember how many times I went to find him with the agreement in hand. He glanced at it and simply put down his work, beckoning me over. I understood what he meant. These days, I rarely sat in a chair. Most of the time, he held me in his arms like this. I found it increasingly difficult to understand him. If he didn't like me, why would he still hold on to me? We were at a stalemate, and in the end, I gave in and sat on his lap. With a bit of force, he brought me into his embrace. I've made a new agreement. You can take a look. He quickly flipped through it and then threw the agreement aside. Aviva, I've told you before, as long as you tell me who you truly like, I will let you go. His sticky kisses descended upon me. Every time I brought up the agreement with him, it always ended like this. After accumulating grievances for several days, they finally erupted at this moment. I pushed him away, tears streaming down my face. Stefan Wright, is it fun for you to play with me? I like you, it's you. Are you satisfied now? Why do you not like me at all? But still keep me locked by your side? I've already been considerate enough. I know that when the person you like came back, I should leave on my own. What more do you want from me? He seemed completely stunned, just standing there foolishly wiping my tears. I pushed him away and rushed towards the door. Don't leave, please, give me some time to explain. He tightly wrapped his arms around me from behind, refusing to let go no matter how I struggled. I bit down on his wrist, and he immediately let out a painful cry. But even so, it didn't shake him at all. The taste of blood spread in my mouth, and I finally loosened my bite with a touch of despair. Tears fell on his hand. Stefan awkwardly wiped away my tears while softly comforting me. I like you, Aviva. Among all the comforting words, only this sentence lingered in my mind. What are you saying? Stefan told me about his past with that girl. It turned out that Mrs. Wright's controlling nature had shown signs many years ago. At that time, Stefan was still in college, but his mother always felt that he was at the age to get married and urged him repeatedly to find a girlfriend. Helpless. Stefan happened to meet a senior who was in a similar situation. The two of them coincidentally became a couple in a contractual relationship. But they were naturally incompatible, not to mention any ambiguous actions, even eating together was uncomfortable. It didn't take long for Stefan's mother to notice something unusual about the two of them. Without much investigation, she knew that they had conspired to deceive her. The senior sister secretly left overnight, leaving behind rumors that Stefan was abandoned by his love. This time, that girl came back to deliver an invitation. She found true love overseas and didn't forget to mock her former contractual lover. I listened in a daze, unable to describe the feeling in my heart. Don't you like her? Stefan was a little anxious, kissing me repeatedly on my ear, repeatedly assuring me that he didn't have any ulterior motives towards her. I never dared to think that Mr. Wright, whom I liked, would actually fall in love with me. Obviously, he agreed to be my contractual lover with his own mouth. When did it start? It was a long time ago. I thought you had already noticed, that's why I allowed myself to invade your territory like that, but I didn't expect. It was only through our past interactions that I gradually sensed something different. He was gradually approaching me, but it was also like pulling me directly into his territory. The surveillance thing, isn't it also fake? He sighed, that's true. At first, I only wanted to play the role of a contractual lover with you, but I didn't expect you to be so obedient. I really had a hard time controlling myself. Every time I tried to scare you away, you unknowingly stepped back, giving me another chance to do something even more excessive. Ripples appeared in my heart. I never expected that one day, unrequited love would turn into mutual affection. But I still felt uneasy in my heart and couldn't help but bite down on his shoulder. Normally, I would never dare to do such a thing. But since he also likes me, can't I enjoy a little privilege he gives me? Stefan was stunned for a moment, then chuckled lightly and smoothed my hair. Soon, my one-sided revenge took a different turn. He pecked lightly at my neck, claiming that I suddenly gave him an agreement, making him think that I had feelings for someone else. He said he was jealous and insisted that I should comfort him. He half embraced me and placed me on the table, layers of fabric falling and piling up at our feet. The red marks he deliberately left on me had started to fade, and Stefan meticulously traced over them, coloring them again. The light in front of me was completely blocked by him, as if the whole world had only his silhouette. I didn't know how much longer it would take to satisfy him, but when I regained some awareness, he was still kissing my lips tenderly. Soon, a hint of ambiguity filled the air, my eyes turned red, but I obediently followed his lead, sacrificing myself to his love. Love is uncontrollable. Our breaths intertwined, and I could feel his burning warmth. Surveillance, there is surveillance. My hazy consciousness barely reminded me that Mrs. Wright was still monitoring our every move, so I couldn't help but struggle gently. Stefan brushed against the corner of my lips. It's okay, it's already been taken care of. It turned out that Mrs. Wright hadn't been paying attention to us for a long time. She said young people are carefree, and she wanted us to settle down early so she wouldn't have to worry. Stefan never mentioned these things. Every time he wrapped his arm around my waist, I instinctively thought it was Mrs. Wright watching us, so I obediently followed his movements. And yet you took advantage of the opportunity to be handsy. I lightly bit his fingertip, blushed and loosened my grip under his playful gaze. When will you come home with me? My mom really likes you, she keeps mentioning that I should bring you home. I was still a little nervous in my heart, after all, Mrs. Wright had always left a strong impression on me. But when I actually met her, I realized she was far from what I had imagined. After spending a day together, I rarely saw Mrs. Wright's dominance, but instead felt her warmth and kindness. She understood my preferences, and we never ran out of things to talk about. I always felt like I saw Stefan's shadow in her. Most of the time, Stefan was gentle, and being around him never made me uncomfortable. Only at night, he would suddenly change, with strong arms and a commanding tone, as if he wanted to bring me into his embrace to feel at ease. Aviva, when are you planning to give Stefan a status? Mrs. Wright smiled and patted my hand, making my face blush uncontrollably. Feeling a bit helpless, I turned around to look for Stefan. But instead of his usual way of resolving things, Stefan was staring at me intently. I want to ask my parents, and if they agree, I can do it anytime. Mrs. Wright immediately smiled with joy and pulled me to give me lots of jewelry she used to like when she was young. Naturally, my parents did not object at all. Even before Stefan and I got together, they already liked this promising young man. And now that we are together, they like him even more. After having a meal together, both families set a date. Before that, we attended the wedding banquet of that girl. She was shocked and couldn't believe that Stefan could find a girlfriend. I'll tell you. Even though it's a bit mean for a friend to say this, but for such a lifelong matter, you still need to understand it well before making a decision. Stefan fake smiled and tightly held my hand, and the girl immediately slipped away. What did she say to you? After thinking for a moment, I leaned closer to his lips. She said your girlfriend is so beautiful. The dissatisfaction in Stefan's eyes instantly disappeared. He cornered me, holding me for a while, before finally letting me go. I naturally knew the hidden side of Stefan. But I love him, and every facet of him is a vivid part of his soul, which is what attracted me in the first place. Time passed bit by bit, and soon the day I had been looking forward to arrived. Stefan's hand was even hotter than usual, and every movement of his made my soul tremble incessantly. In the midst of our deep love, I saw him take out a familiar document and pause for a moment. He held my hand and opened the agreement, which contained only one line. Never leave each other. Our breaths intertwined, and we fell onto the bed together. In silent understanding, this agreement became the binding force of our souls. We finally became each other's only one.